So as I promised, more content for the YouTube channel just to get you ready for your exams that are coming up next week. Now I thought I'd just do a couple of little video clips on problems in society. So I'm going to do two, one for this topic that you can see in the middle of the screen, which is why did immigration become such a major problem in American society, and one for topic two, which obviously will be in the next video. Now this one I feel like I really need to explain properly, because there's a lot of confusion about this topic and there's quite a few mistakes that people tend to make. Now, I'm going to start with the open door policy. Now, when people are asked about immigration laws, they start talking about the open door policy, and the open door policy is not a law. The open door policy is what America has prior to 1910. Or in fact, they have it really all the way up until 1917, where they are actively encouraging people to come to America. Now, the knock-on effect of that is lots of people come to America from all countries all over the world, and particularly from Europe, especially Eastern Europe, where it's basically the effects of World War I have really had a detrimental effect on the people there. So they're trying to find somewhere better to live. So hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are coming over from Europe in particular to America. Now, all of a sudden, America starts to realise that it's getting a huge influx of people. And there's a lot of people in America that don't like it. In particular, the Republican politicians we know about the 1920s who encouraged the economic boom. They start getting a bit teasy about who's coming into America. Now, the first actual law that's passed is the literacy test. Now, the idea of this is to discourage immigrants that come from anywhere that's non-English speaking, or that they discourage immigrants that are non-English speaking. So basically what they do is they pass a literacy test, so the Literacy Act of 1917, and it costs $8 to pass the literacy test. Now that puts off or discriminates, whichever way you want to look at that, against any immigrants that are basically not from the traditional sorts of places and don't speak English. So that's the first law or measure that they actually take to restrict immigration. The second one, which is the picture down there with the funnel, is the Emergency Quota Act of 1921, which restricts the amount of immigrants coming in from any country to 3%. Now that's later then adjusted with the third immigration law, National Origins Act of 1924, which brings that number down to 2% and changes the census if you want to get into the real nitty-gritty and details of it. And basically the reason for that is just to even further discriminate against immigrants that don't come from white Anglo-Saxon Protestant countries. So what they're trying to do is clamp down on immigrants that are coming from Russia, Eastern Europe, etc., etc. And there's other links on this page that really explain why they're doing that. And the final Immigration Act is the Immigration Act of 1929, which reduces immigration to 150,000 and states outright no Asians. So basically what's happened with immigration? America's gone from welcoming it to shutting it down completely. And that really is, I think, reflective of what is going on in American society at that time. It has big impact on American attitudes towards other races, religions, ethnic groups, etc. Now, the biggest link that you get in the topic question here that links in with that the most is about communism. Now, that links very heavily to immigration, because obviously the Red Scare it's triggered by immigrants coming from Eastern Europe, because in Eastern Europe at that time there was the spread of communism. So immigrants that are coming from Poland, that are coming from Russia, Americans fear they're bringing communist ideas with them, which is a bit ironic, because if they really, really love communism and they bought into its values and they thought it was a worthwhile system, it would kind of make sense to stay where they are. But obviously they don't see it that way. Now, what happens is during the 1920s, there is a growth of communist activity. There's a lot of strikes, and there are a lot of activists that are doing things like bombings. In particular, we know about the bombing of Mitchell Palmer's house, which kills his family, Mitchell Palmer being a quite high politician, the Attorney General. And that then triggers the Palmer raids, where basically around about 4,000 communists are arrested and they're sent back to the USA. Sent back to USA. So that's nonsense, isn't it? Sent back to Russia. And they're sent back to Russia, basically, whether they're Russian or not. Most of them happen to be Americans. Because as I said before, any Russians that are coming to live in America during this period are highly likely not to be communist activists, because otherwise they probably would have stayed at home. So a lot of innocent Americans, or Americans that just happen to be associated with communism, whether they're part of the party or not, are sent back to Russia on a boat called the Soviet Ark. Now, another form of activist or group of people that Americans don't like at this particular time is anarchists. Okay, and they're people who basically don't believe in organised government. So at the time, America was really becoming intolerant of these ideas, these beliefs, because they really don't fit with the American idea. Now, that brings me on to the case of Sacco and Vanzetti. You see them down at the bottom there. Now, Sacco and Vanzetti are accused of murder and robbery, payroll for a shoe factory. Now, the evidence is not clear. There's evidence that suggests they did, and evidence that suggests they didn't. Either way, it's what we would call inconclusive. Now, Sacco and Vanzetti received the electric chair penalty in 1927, which is basically because the judge is heavily biased against them. Number one, because they're Italians. Number two, because they're immigrants. Number three, because he thinks that they've got political beliefs that don't fit in with America, i.e. they're anarchist activists. Okay, so this is a really, really big example, and it's how it fits in with immigration, really. So immigration and the Red Scare go hand in hand, and questions tend to focus on the two of them together. But if you're talking about problems in society, these are two huge, great big problems that exist in America.